by clicking the settings gear icon, then clicking audio track, and then selecting the language you prefer. Huge thank you once again to 11 Labs for their help with translation and dubbing, and with the bigger mission of breaking down barriers that language creates. They are truly one of the most remarkable companies I've ever had the pleasure of working with. This is the Lex Friedman podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Pavel Durov. You've been an advocate for freedom for many years, writing that you should be ready to risk everything for freedom. What were some influences and insights that helped you arrive at this value of human freedom?
I get to experience the difference between a society with freedom and a society without freedom pretty early in life. I was 4 years old when my family moved from the Soviet Union to northern Italy, and I could see that a society without freedom cannot enjoy the abundance of opinions, of ideas, of goods and services. Even for a 4 or 5 year old kid, it was obvious. Like you can't experience all the toys, the ice cream of sorts, the cartoons in the Soviet Union that you could access in Italy. And then I got to realize something even more important. You don't get to contribute to this abundance without freedom. And at this point, it was pretty obvious to me.
You also wrote "Svoboda важнее денег," translates to "freedom matters more than money." How do you prevent these values for freedom being corrupted by money, by people with influence, by people with power?
Well, the biggest enemies of freedom are fear and greed. So you make sure that they don't stand in your way. If you imagine the worst thing that can happen to you and then make yourself be comfortable with it, there's nothing more left to be afraid of. So you stand your ground and you remember that it's worth living your life according to the principles that you believe in, even though this life can end up being shorter than a longer life, but lived in slavery.
Do you contemplate your mortality? You think about your death?
Oh, yes.
You afraid of it?
In a way, you have to go against your instinct of self preservation. And it's not easy. We are all biological beings, hard coded to be afraid of death. Nobody wants to die. But when you approach it rationally, you live and then you die. There's no such thing as your death in your life. You stop experiencing life once you die. So you have to ask yourself this question: is it worth living a life full of fear of death? Or it's much more enjoyable to forget about this and live your life in a way that makes you immune to this fear. At the same time, remembering that death exists so that every day would count.
Yeah, remembering that death exists makes you deeply feel every moment that you do get.
That's why I love reminding myself that I can die any day.
In many ways, you live a pretty stoic existence. I got a chance to spend a couple of weeks with you. In many ways, you seek to minimize the negative effects of the outside world on your mind. You've written, quote, "If you want to reach your full potential and maintain clarity of mind, stay away from addictive substances. My success and health are the result of 20 plus years of complete abstinence from alcohol, tobacco, coffee, pills, and illegal drugs. Short term pleasure isn't worth your future." Let's talk about each one of these. Alcohol. What's been your philosophy behind that?
That one is quite easy. When I was 11 years old, my biochemistry teacher, he gave me this book he wrote. It was called The Illusion of Paradise. And there he would describe the biological and chemical processes that happen in your body once you consume this or that substance. It was mainly related to illegal drugs, but alcohol was one of these addictive substances that he covered. So it turns out that when you drink alcohol, the thing that happens is that your brain cells become paralyzed. They become literally zombies. And then next day, sometime after the party is over, some of your brain cells die and never get to normal. So think about this: if your brain is this most valuable tool you have in your journey to success and happiness, why would you destroy this tool for short term pleasure? This sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, in many ways, it's a poison we'll let in our body. But by way of advice, what advice would you give to people who consider not drinking? A lot of people use alcohol to enable them to have a vibrant social life. There's a lot of pressures from society, at a party to drink so you can socialize. So, what advice would you give to them, to people who imagine having a social life without alcohol?
Well, first of all, don't be afraid to be contrarian. Set your own rules. Secondly, if you feel you need to drink, there must be some problem you're trying to conceal. There's something that, some fear you're not ready to confront. And you have to address this fear. If there is a good looking girl you're afraid to approach, get rid of this fear, approach her, practice, do it again and again. It's pretty banal, but this advice works.
Fix the underlying problem, which is usually at the very bottom, is always going to be fear. Work on that.
And very often people are trying to escape something in their lives with alcohol. What is it they're trying to escape? What is this problem? You have to get to the bottom of it. Your mind is trying to tell you something valuable. And instead of addressing it directly, you are flooding it in alcohol, which is sort of a spiritual painkiller, but works only temporarily. And then you have to pay the debt with interest.
So, what do you do? I mean, you've been in a lot of gatherings, a lot of parties. Is there some challenges to saying no?
For me, not at all. I've been always ready to stand my ground and say no when I feel something's not right. And it's extraordinary how easily we humans are affected by what we perceive as majority. Because nobody since ancient times, since million years ago, wants to be left out by the tribe. We are scared that we won't become accepted anymore, which thousands of millions of years ago meant we're going to starve to death. So we have to consciously fight this inclination to be agreeable with everything that the majority imposes on you, because it's quite clear that many things that the majority, in many activities the majority is engaging in, are not bringing you any good.
So, that's another fear you have to face, going into a party and the fear of being the outcast at that party, of being different than others at that party, at that social gathering, in the crowd of humans, be different. That's a fear.
That's the fear. And it's quite irrational if you think about it. It was something that made a lot of sense 20,000 years ago. It makes zero sense today. Because if you think about it, if you do the same thing everybody else around you is doing, you don't have any competitive advantage. And you don't get to become outstanding at some point in your life.
Yeah, that's one of the things we talked about, sort of by way of advice, is if you want to be successful in life, you want to be different.
Definitely.
And perhaps, I think you said, you want to achieve mastery at a niche. So find the niche at which you can pursue with all your effort and achieve mastery. And the niche being different than anything that anybody else is doing. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So, obviously, in order to contribute to the society you're in, to the economy of the country you live in, you have to do something that is valuable. But if you're doing something that everybody else is doing anyway, What's the value of it? Now, it sounds easier than it is done to do something that nobody else is doing because we humans are surrounded by all kinds of information, which makes us want to copy what we're perceiving. At the same time, there are so many areas which you can explore that have nothing to do with the information you receive on the daily basis. So it's extremely important to curate the information sources that you have so that you wouldn't be somebody who is left to the will of AI based algorithmic feed telling you what's important so that you end up consuming the same information, the same stuff, the same memes, the same news as everybody else. But rather, you should be proactive. You should deliberately try to set a goal, an area that you want to explore, and then actively search information that is relevant to this field so that one day you can become the world's number one expert in this field. And it's not that difficult to do that. You have to just remain consistent because nobody else is trying to do that. Everybody else is just reading the same news and discussing the same news every day. But this way, they don't get to have a competitive advantage.
Yeah, majority of the population becomes slaves to the AI recommender systems, AI driven recommender systems. And so the content everybody's fed is the same thing, and we all become the same. On that point, one of the different things you do is you don't use a phone, except occasionally to test Telegram features. But I've been with you for 2 weeks. I haven't seen you use a phone at all in the way that most people use a phone, like for their social media. So, can you describe your philosophy behind that?
I don't think a phone is a necessary device. I remember growing up, I didn't have a mobile phone. When I was a student at the university, I didn't have a mobile phone. When I finally got it to use a mobile phone, I never used phone calls. I was always in airplane mode or mute. I hated the idea of being disturbed. My philosophy here is pretty simple. I want to define what is important in my life. I don't want other people or companies, all kinds of organizations telling me what is important today and what I should be thinking about. Just set up your own agenda, and the phone gets in your way.
It provides distractions. It guides what you should be looking at, what you will be looking at. So you don't want that. You want to quiet the mind. You want to choose what kind of stuff you let inside your mind.
Yes, because this way I can contribute to the progress of society, or at least I like to think this way, and this makes me happier.
How often do you find quiet time to just think and focus deeply on work without any distractions? You mentioned to me that you value quiet mornings.
Yes. So the thing I'm trying to do, I try to allocate as much time as possible for sleep. Now, even if I allocate, say, 11 or 12 hours for sleep, I won't sleep for 11 or 12 hours.